Sometimes the smallest moments, the ones we barely notice, end up staying with us the longest. The stories you're about to hear aren't dramatic headlines or breaking news, they're quiet pieces of human life. A stranger's memory, a routine filled with love, a grief carried softly, a reminder that everyone you pass is holding something you know nothing about. This is Reddit Echoes, where real stories linger long after the words fade. Story 1. Broken engagement. Because of sister and journey to reconciliation with father, I was 21 when my fiancé asked me to marry him. He was the absolute light of my life. We had known each other since preschool, literally. Our families were so close that he ate dinner at my house more often than his own. He didn't have siblings, but I did 2 older sisters. And somehow he was close with them too. We all grew up together. He supported me through everything. When I gained some weight and my mother told me he would leave me, he stood up for me right in front of her and said he loved me for who I was, not what I looked like. He told me I was the most beautiful girl in the world to him. We were engaged for only 6 months before everything fell apart. My middle sister Nikki has always been cold. She rarely showed affection to anyone except my fiancé, the one person she opened up to. She said she saw him as a brother, and he helped her through some awful times, like drug addiction and getting into trouble with the law. I loved her because she was family, but I didn't like her as a person. We never saw eye to eye. One day out of nowhere, Nikki told me she wanted to take me clubbing because she felt bad for being distant from me. I was surprised, but I agreed. Clubbing wasn't really my thing, but after a few drinks, I loosened up and started having fun. Everything was going fine until Nikki saw a guy across the room and said she wanted to climb him like a tree. She walked over, but within minutes, she came back looking furious. I asked what happened. She wouldn't tell me at first, but after I kept pushing, she snapped and said, "The guy didn't want her number, he wanted mine." I told her he was a loser and she could do better, but she was clearly angry. Then she said she needed to go to the bathroom and that we'd leave after. She never came back. I waited for an hour. I kept drinking while I waited and my head started spinning. I finally gave up and decided to take a cab home. But on the way out, I bumped into a guy Nikki had briefly dated. He asked if I needed help getting to my car, and I told him I was taking a cab. He said he was leaving too and suggested we share one. I agreed. I was too dizzy to think straight. I remember getting into the cab. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was on a hard couch with a pounding headache. I realized I was in that guy's apartment. My phone was on the table dead. He told me I passed out in the cab, and since he didn't know my parents' address, he brought me to his place and let me sleep on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home because my fiancé would be worried. He called a cab for me and I left. When I got to my parents' house, everyone was there. My mom, my dad, Nikki, my fiancé, his parents. I thought they were worried about me. But the moment I opened my mouth, my fiancé asked, "How could you do this to me?" I froze. He started yelling, accusing me of cheating. I tried to explain about my phone dying and how I'd passed out. But every time I tried to speak, someone cut me off. Nikki jumped in and called me a lying bitch. She said I had been flirting with random guys all night and that she saw me leave with her friend. Then she pulled out photos. In the picture as we were leaving the club, his hand was on my back, guiding me outside. It looked awful. I was so drunk, I didn't even realize it had happened. My fiancé was shaking with anger. His mother and mine were crying. I begged Nikki to call her friend and clear things up. She called him, and he lied. He said I begged him to take me home and that we slept together multiple times. I saw red. I screamed that Nikki set this up. I begged my fiancé to believe me, but he just shook his head and walked out. When everyone left, my mother slapped me across the face and told me to get out. She threw my things away and said she never wanted to see me again. In less than 40 hours, I lost my fiancé, my family, my home, everything. I called my fiancé for weeks sobbing, begging him to believe me. He never answered. My mom texted me horrible things. None of my family helped me. Nobody even asked for my side. They just threw me away. That Christmas, I tried to go home again. I knocked on the door. No one answered. My friend called me and said she saw on Facebook that my entire family was celebrating out of state, with my fiancé and his family. In the photos, they all looked so happy, happier than they ever looked with me. I cried for days. Then I blocked them all and returned my engagement ring. A friend helped me move to another town. I got a job in a restaurant, lived in a tiny room above it, worked 10-hour shifts almost every day. After a while, I saved enough to move into a nicer place. I eventually became an assistant manager. 2 years passed. I cut off everyone. And then one day, someone knocked on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. Seeing him felt like being hit by a truck. Part of me wanted to hug him. The other part remembered the nights I spent crying alone, the months of being homeless, the betrayal. I tried to slam the door, but he held it and begged me to let him explain. He said Nikki had confessed everything. She admitted she had lied and manipulated the entire situation. She told him she thought he deserved better than me and wanted to break us up. I asked him how he even found me, and he said my old friend told him. He said my whole family had been trying to contact me. I told him I needed time. He left, and I broke down after he did. I didn't answer him again. But eventually my parents started contacting me too. I ignored their messages. I thought about maybe doing a video call. But then my father showed up at my door. When I saw him standing there, I threw up from the shock. He helped clean it. Then we sat down, and I burst into tears. Just the smell of his cologne made memories crash into me. He tried to hug me, but I pulled away and asked why he was there. He told me he and my mother were getting a divorce. He said he begged her to reach out to me from day one, but she refused. She said if I wanted to leave, then I should suffer without them. I asked him why he didn't defend me, why I was so easy to throw away, when Nikki had done far worse things, drugs, dropping out, getting arrested, and yet they defended her again and again. He cried. He said he never meant for things to spiral. He said he wished he could take it back. He said he thought my mother would calm down after a few days. He didn't know she told me my things were thrown out because they weren't. She just lied to scare me away. He said Nikki was dead to him, that he blocked her and my mother, and that he had forced my ex to track me down. I told him that he couldn't show up again unless I allowed it, and he agreed. I told him he had hurt me more than he understood. And I finally let myself say everything I had been holding and how it felt to see them happy without me, how abandoned I felt, how I wished someone had just asked me what happened instead of assuming the worst. We both cried. But after it all, I felt lighter. He asked why Nikki did it. I told him that's what I wanted to know too. He said she admitted she thought my fiancé sacrificed too much for me, that he deserved someone better, and that she wanted to save him from marrying me. She asked her friend to escort me out drunk so she could take photos and frame me. Nothing happened in that apartment. I slept fully clothed on the sofa. The guy played video games all night. He had proof. Before my dad left, he gave me the number of Nikki's husband. I called him. He sounded tired, confused. I told him everything. And he said quietly that he wasn't surprised. Nikki had lied about his own sister so much that she skipped their wedding. He said he knew something was wrong with Nikki, but now he finally understood. I told him he should fix things with his family because Nikki was the problem, not them. And now, I'm slowly reconciling with my dad. He's trying for the first time in his life. He stood up to my mother. He cut Nikki out. He's actually doing the work. But as for my mother, I don't think I'll ever forgive her. She still defends Nikki, still calls her a victim. She threw me away like trash. I don't want her in my life. As for my ex, I don't know. My dad told me he was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend after finding out the truth. The charges were dropped, but I haven't talked to him. I'm not sure if I ever will. What I do know is that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who break you the deepest. And sometimes healing starts when you walk away, even if it means walking alone. Story 2. A cup of coffee at Starbucks and the husband learning how to make it from his wife. Last week I was driving home from work. Last Friday morning I walked into Starbucks half awake and fully on autopilot. I wasn't thinking about anything except getting caffeine into my bloodstream as fast as humanly possible. I was standing there waiting for my drink when I noticed this older man at the self-serve counter staring at the oat milk like it had personally insulted him. He looked completely lost. I mean the kind of lost where you can tell someone's trying not to panic in public. I hesitated for a second because social anxiety, but eventually I just asked, "Do you need help?" He looked so relieved it almost made me emotional. He admitted that he had absolutely no idea how the milk syrup or stirring situation worked. Then he said something that hit me right in the chest. His wife used to make his coffee every single morning exactly the way he liked it. But she had passed away. Since then, he'd been trying to recreate the taste, but he could never get it right. Hearing that at 8 in the morning was like getting punched in the feelings. So I walked him through it. 2 pumps of vanilla, a little oat milk, then stir. He told me his wife always stirred it exactly 3 times, so he did the same. When he took a sip, his face softened, and he smiled like he hadn't tasted something familiar in a very long time. Then he said, "You just saved me $4. This tastes better than what they make behind the counter." And he patted me on the shoulder like I'd just fixed something bigger than a cup of coffee. It was such a tiny moment, but I couldn't stop thinking about it for the rest of the day, how one day the person who knows exactly how you like your coffee might not be there anymore. How someone's entire morning routine, their comfort, their stability, their memories, all of that can disappear, and you're left trying to recreate a taste you can't quite remember. I don't know why this wrecked me emotionally at 8 a.m. on a Friday, but it did. And honestly, I hope he enjoyed his coffee the next morning. Later, someone commented with a story that made everything hit even harder. They said their dad was at a gas station when an elderly woman came up to him asking for help. She didn't know how to pump gas because her husband had been doing it for her for 50 years, and he had just passed away. Their dad showed her how to do it, and she was teary-eyed the entire time. He felt gutted afterward because he always fills his wife's tank when it gets low. And suddenly, for the first time, he imagined the day he might not be there to do it anymore. I don't know. Maybe we're all just walking around carrying tiny griefs in places no one sees. Maybe a cup of coffee or a tank of gas is never just that. But that morning, helping a stranger reminded me how fragile and precious our routines can be and how love lingers quietly in the smallest things people do for each other. Story 3. Woman fills her own gasoline for the first time in over 50 years. Last week, I was driving home from work when I saw an elderly woman standing beside her car at a gas station looking completely helpless. At first, I thought she might just be waiting for someone, so I didn't pay much attention. But when I came out of the convenience store, she was still standing there holding her keys, like she didn't know what to do with them. I walked over and asked if she needed help. She smiled politely, the kind of smile people make when they're trying not to cry, and said, "I'm sorry. I've never pumped my own gas before." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. She told me her husband had always done it for her. For over 50 years, he pumped her gas, checked her tires, cleaned her windshield, all the little things you never think twice about until the person who does them is gone. And he had passed away 3 weeks earlier. She said this was her first time driving further than the grocery store because she had a doctor's appointment. She didn't realize how low the tank was until her dashboard beeped, and by the time she pulled into the station, she was so overwhelmed that she just froze. So I walked her through it gently. How to open the gas cap, how to select the fuel, how to squeeze the handle, how it clicks when it's full. She listened carefully, nodding like a student trying to memorize something important. When it was done, she whispered, "Thank you. He always told me not to worry about this stuff. And now I have to learn everything alone." I didn't know what to say. I just told her she was doing great and that she wasn't alone in learning new things. We all have to, eventually. She placed her hand over mine and said, "I thought I'd grow old with him. I didn't think I'd have to grow after him." And for some reason, that sentence stayed with me all day. We grow with people. We build routines around them. We let them fill the small spaces in our lives, pumping gas, making coffee, locking the doors at night, reminding us to bring an umbrella. And when they're gone, the world suddenly becomes full of tasks you never wanted to do alone. Before she drove away, she thanked me again and said, "He would have liked you." It was such a small moment, but it felt like I had stepped into someone's love story right at the chapter where everything hurts the most. I don't know why these encounters with strangers hit so deeply lately, but they make me realize that all the tiny things people do for us, the rituals, the habits, the everyday acts of love, they matter far more than we notice. And maybe one day, someone will need us to help them with something as simple as a gas pump. Not because they're incapable, but because they're grieving someone who always did it for them. Story 4. The Old Man, the Park Bench, and the Second Muffin. A few months ago, I started taking early morning walks before work. Not because I'm one of those 5 a.m. motivational quotes people, but because I couldn't sleep anymore. I was going through a breakup, work was stressful, and my brain just refused to shut up. So I walked. Every morning I passed the same small park, and every morning I saw the same old man sitting on the same bench. He always had the same routine. He'd sit down slowly, pull out a brown paper bag, take out 2 muffins, and then place one beside him on the empty space like he was saving it for someone. The first few times, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he just liked having 2. Maybe he fed the birds. Who knows? But one morning, curiosity got the better of me. I walked over, nodded politely, and said, "You always bring 2 muffins." He smiled without looking at me and said, "Old habits." Then he tapped the empty spot next to him. "She used to sit here." I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. He told me that for 43 years he and his wife had breakfast together in this park. She loved blueberry muffins and he hated them, but he always bought 2 because she said it looked memorable. She passed away last winter. He said he kept coming back because this was their place, and he kept bringing 2 muffins because, well, stopping would feel like losing her all over again. We sat quietly for a moment. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to someone holding so much love and grief in their hands at the same time? Then he laughed softly and said, "I know she's not eating it. But it's not really about the muffin. It's about remembering that someone once shared this bench with me. Something about that stuck with me for the rest of the day. It made me realize how people never really disappear from our lives. They leave little routines behind 2 muffins, an empty seat, a habit you can't break, and the world keeps spinning, but with tiny reminders of someone who isn't here anymore. Since then, I've started sitting with him every Friday. He brings 2 muffins and I bring coffee. We don't talk much. We don't need to. Sometimes grief just wants company, not conversation. Last week, he handed me the second muffin and said, "She would have liked you. You ask gentle questions." For some reason, that simple sentence made my chest tighten. I guess when someone carries memories, that precious being invited into even a small part of them feels like an honor. I don't know how long he'll keep coming to that bench, or how long I'll keep joining him. But I do know this grief changes shape, but it never really leaves. And sometimes the best thing we can do is sit beside someone who's remembering a love worth grieving. Story 5. The cereal box in the supermarket and the dead husband. A few weeks ago, something strange happened at the grocery store. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just strange in a way that stuck with me. I was standing in the cereal aisle trying to pick between 2 brands I've probably eaten 1,000 times when an older woman approached me. She had that nervous, hesitant look people have when they're not sure if they're allowed to talk to a stranger. She said, "Excuse me, could you reach that box for me?" Easy enough. I grabbed it, handed it to her, and thought that would be the end of it. But she kept standing there holding the cereal against her chest like it was something fragile. Then she said, "My husband always got this one. I don't actually like it, but I don't know. I keep buying it anyway." At first I thought she was just making small talk. Then she added quietly, "He passed away in March." Everything in her voice dropped when she said that. Like the words were heavier than the box she was holding. She told me they had been married 52 years. He did the grocery shopping because he loved comparing prices and beating the system. She hated it. She said shopping made her anxious, made her feel like she had to make 1,000,000 tiny decisions she didn't care about. But every Sunday, he'd bring home this exact cereal. And now she just buys it out of habit because buying something else feels wrong. I didn't know what to say. It didn't seem right to pretend I understood her grief, but it also felt wrong to walk away. So I said the only honest thing I could think of. Some habits feel like love even after the person who created them is gone. She smiled. Not a happy smile, more like a smile that hurt a little. Then she said, "I keep thinking grief will get easier. But really, it just gets quieter. And then moments like this make it loud again." We talked for a few more minutes. She told me his name, how they met, how he used to hide candy bars in the pantry because he thought she didn't know. She laughed when she said that, and for a second I could see the version of her who wasn't grieving the version who had 52 years of inside jokes with someone she loved. Before she walked away, she touched my arm lightly and said, "Thank you for listening. People don't understand that sometimes grief just wants a witness." And then she was gone, pushing her cart slowly toward the checkout. I stood there for a while thinking about how much of our lives is built around another person's presence. Grocery store routines, morning rituals, favorite brands we don't even like, and how those little things become invisible until the person tied to them disappears. I don't know her name. I'll probably never see her again. But now every time I walk down that aisle and see that box of cereal, I don't think about breakfast anymore. I think about love, and how quiet and loud grief can be, and how sometimes the hardest part of losing someone isn't the big moments. It's standing in the cereal aisle trying to decide whether to keep buying something they used to love. Story 6. The Man at the Diner and Grilled Cheese. Fridays. There's a small public Libra. There's a little diner near my workplace, one of those old-fashioned neon sign, bottomless coffee kind of places that somehow always smells like pancakes, even when no one's eating them. I go there maybe twice a week, usually during slow afternoons, when I need a quiet place to think. About a month ago, I noticed an older man sitting in the corner booth. He was always alone, always reading the same worn-out paperback, always ordering the same thing, a grilled cheese and a black coffee. Every time I saw him, he looked peaceful, but in a lonely kind of way. One day, the diner was almost empty, and he ended up sitting in the booth right across from mine. When the waitress came by to take his order, she said, "The usual." He smiled and nodded. Then he glanced over at me and said, "You know I used to hate grilled cheese." I laughed because I wasn't expecting that at all. He said, "My wife loved them. Every Friday for 40 years we had grilled cheese together. I still don't like them, but I guess my stomach got too used to the routine." He paused for a moment, then added, "She passed 3 years ago. But when I eat this, I feel like she's still here complaining that I burn mine every single time." We talked for a bit after that, not about grief, not about tragedy, just small things, books, coffee, weather, and somehow that made the air feel lighter. Over the next few weeks, I kept running into him. Not intentionally, we just seemed to show up at the diner at the same times. Sometimes we'd sit together, sometimes we wouldn't, but we always exchanged a few words. One afternoon, he slid into my booth without asking and said, "Can I show you something?" He opened his wallet and pulled out a tiny photograph. A woman laughing, her hair blowing everywhere like the wind was trying to steal it. He said, "This was her. She laughed like that every Friday, even when life was awful, especially then." I told him she seemed like someone worth missing. He nodded. Grief doesn't go away. It just changes shape. Sometimes it weighs less. Sometimes it sneaks up on you in the cereal aisle or when you see someone with the same haircut. And sometimes, he lifted his grilled cheese, sometimes it tastes like burnt toast. We both laughed at that. It felt comforting in a strange way. Last week, when I walked into the diner, he wasn't there. The corner booth was empty for the first time since I'd noticed him. I figured he must have had an appointment or just stayed home. But when I went back 2 days later, the waitress came over and quietly said, "He won't be coming in anymore." Just like that. No details. No explanation. It was clear what she meant. She said he told her once that he liked seeing me around, that talking to me made the diner feel less empty. I think I sat there for 10 minutes without saying anything. I ordered a grilled cheese that day. It tasted fine. Not great, not bad. But I understood it a little better. I didn't know his name until the waitress told me afterward. She said his wife's name, too. She even showed me a second photo he'd once left behind by accident. They looked so happy together. I kept thinking about the way he said grief changes shape. Maybe that's true. Maybe sometimes it takes the shape of a quiet diner booth, or a stranger who becomes a familiar face, or a sandwich you never liked but couldn't stop ordering. I didn't know him well. We weren't family. We weren't even friends in the traditional sense. But he taught me something without meaning to. Love lingers. Sometimes in memories, sometimes in routines, and sometimes in the people who sit with you long enough for grief to feel a little less heavy. There's a small public library near my apartment. It's not fancy or modern or anything. The paint is chipped, the chairs squeak, and the old carpet smells like dust and forgotten stories. But it's quiet, and sometimes quiet is all I need. A few weeks ago, I was sitting in the corner near the large window, trying to escape my own thoughts, when an elderly woman sat down at the table across from me. She had a stack of children's books, picture books, fairy tales, colorful covers, but she wasn't reading them. She just opened each one, slowly, flipped through a few pages, and closed it again. After a while, I glanced up and she caught me looking. She smiled and said, "I'm not crazy, I promise." I laughed and told her I wasn't judging. She tapped the top book gently and said, "My grandson used to love these. I used to read to him every Saturday morning. He'd sit right on my lap and make me do all the voices." She had that soft, trembling voice that comes from holding back more emotions than you want to show. She told me her daughter moved across the country last year, took the grandson with her. They thought he needed better schools, better opportunities, she said. And they're probably right. But it means I only get to see him through a screen now. And kids, they grow so fast. One day you blink and suddenly they don't fit in your lap anymore. She laughed softly, but it wasn't a happy laugh. I asked if she visited them often. She shook her head. "They're busy, and I don't want to be the kind of mother who makes her children feel guilty for building a life." Then she looked down at her hands, small, wrinkled, fidgeting with the corner of a page, and said, "But sometimes I come here and read these books anyway. It reminds me of when he used to fall asleep on my shoulder. We talked for a long time, mostly about little things, favorite stories, silly moments with kids, the way time never seems to slow down, even when you're begging it to." She asked what I was reading, and I showed her. It wasn't anything special, just a novel I picked up to distract myself. But she nodded thoughtfully, like it mattered. She said, "Books are funny. They hold people together even when life pulls them apart." Before she left, she picked up the stack of children's books and said, "Do you mind?" Then she handed me one. "Read the first page," she said. "It's nice to hear someone else read for a change." I did. My voice cracked halfway through, not because the story was sad, but because I realized how long it had been since someone asked me to share something simple, something human. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine and whispered, "Thank you. I miss being read to." She walked away slowly, holding the books close to her chest. I watched her return them at the counter, then disappear through the library doors. I haven't seen her since. But now, every time I pass the children's section, I remember her quiet smile and the way she clutched those books like they were pieces of someone she didn't want to forget. And I keep thinking about how many people walk through life carrying invisible losses. Children who grew up too fast. People who moved away. Moments that can't be replayed except inside a book. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes aren't loud or dramatic. They're quiet. They happen in libraries, in routines, in the spaces we fill with memories because the people we love can't sit beside us anymore. Story 8. There's a small bus stop, the wooden chair in front of the house, and the husband missing his wife every sunset. There's a little bench outside my apartment building, nothing special. Just an old wooden bench that creaks when you sit on it. I always pass by it when I take the trash out or when I'm heading to work. For the longest time, I never paid attention to it. Until one day, I noticed the same man sitting there every evening. He looked like he was in his 70s, always wearing the same navy blue jacket, always holding a folded newspaper he never actually read. He'd just sit there watching the world move around him, dogs being walked, kids riding bikes, people scrolling on their phones like their lives depended on it. One evening, I went out to grab my mail and walked past him. He gave me a small nod. I nodded back. That was it. Just a simple moment. But the next evening, he was there again. And the next, and the next. Eventually, we started exchanging a few words. Nothing deep, just weather talk, polite greetings, the kind of conversation people use to fill silence. Then one day he asked, "Do you mind sitting for a moment? I didn't have anywhere to be, so I sat." He told me he liked this bench because from this angle he could see the corner where the sunset hit the building. "My wife used to love sunsets," he said. "She'd make me walk outside with her every evening just to watch the sky change colors." I asked if she lived with him. He shook his head. "She passed away last year. Cancer. She fought hard, but, well, sometimes fighting isn't enough." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a soft kind of acceptance. He said she used to sit on this exact bench when she waited for him to come home from work. She'd wave at him from here. Sometimes she'd fall asleep with a book in her lap. He used to tease her about it. After she died, he said the apartment felt too quiet. "I kept listening for her footsteps," he said. They never came. So he started coming to the bench instead. Not to wait for anything. Not to expect anything. Just to feel close to the place where she used to sit. He pulled a small photo from his wallet, a woman laughing so hard that her eyes were barely open. She laughed like that at everything he said, even at jokes that weren't funny. We sat together for a long time. Not talking, just watching the sun hit the building. I don't know why, but it felt peaceful, like I was helping him carry some of the loneliness he had been holding by himself. Before I left, he told me, "People think grief is about remembering someone, but really it's about learning to live in all the spaces they're no longer filling." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "She seemed like someone worth missing." He smiled, not a sad smile, but a sincere one. She was. For the next few weeks, I made a habit of sitting with him whenever I saw him. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. But each time I left feeling warmer than when I came. Then one evening I walked outside and the bench was empty. I figured he was running late. But the next night, it was empty again. And the next. And the next. A few days later, I asked the building manager if he'd seen the old man. He nodded gently and said, "He passed away in his sleep." His daughter came to collect his belongings. He handed me something, a small photograph. The same one he had shown me. The woman laughing. On the back was a short note. "Thank you for sitting with me." That night, I sat on the bench alone. The sunset hit the building exactly the way he described it. And for the first time, I understood what he meant. Grief isn't just about losing someone. It's about the places they leave behind, the benches, the routines, the sunsets, and the strangers who sit with us just long enough to make those places feel a little less empty. And I realized something. Some people pass through your life quietly, gently, without warning, and still leave something you'll never forget. Story 9. The 5. 15 bus stop and the husband always waiting for his wife to get off work. There's a small story 10. The small flower shop, the widow owner and their garden. There's a small bus stop near my office, one of those old metal shelters with scratched up glass and a bench that somehow always feels cold no matter the weather. I walk by it almost every day around 5 p.m., right when people are getting off work. A few weeks ago, I noticed an older man standing there. Not sitting, standing. Just staring down the road like he was waiting for something he wasn't sure would ever arrive. At first, I didn't think much of it. People wait for buses. It's normal. But he was there again the next day. Same spot. Same time. Same posture. And again, the day after that. After a while, curiosity started eating at me. One evening, the bus was running late, and I ended up waiting right next to him. He looked tired, not physically, but in that quiet, emotional way people get when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time. I finally said, "The bus is slow today, huh?" He smiled politely and said, "I'm not actually waiting for it." That caught me off guard. He said he used to meet his wife here every day after her shift. She worked at the pharmacy down the block. She hated walking home alone, he said. So I'd wait here at 5:15 every day for 34 years. Then he looked down the road again. Even after she passed, I kept coming. Habit, I guess. It wasn't the way he said it, it was the way his voice softened. Like the memory was both comforting and painful at the same time. He told me his wife always complained about that bus stop. Said the bench was uncomfortable, said the roof leaked when it rained, said the bus was never on time. But she liked that he waited. She said it made her feel looked after. He chuckled at the memory. She used to walk toward me waving her lunch bag in the air like a victory flag, every single day, even when she was exhausted. He paused, then added, "She made coming home feel like arriving somewhere." We stood there quietly after that. No dramatic confession, no tears. Just two strangers sharing a little sliver of someone else's love story. A few minutes later, he checked his watch and said, "She used to get off at 5:17. I guess I still keep track." Before he walked away, he said something that stuck with me. When you lose someone, the world doesn't stop. But the routines you shared, they echo. Sometimes that's what hurts the most. The next day, he wasn't there. I figured he was sick or busy, or maybe the weather kept him home. But then the next week passed, and the next, and the bench stayed empty. One afternoon, I saw a middle-aged woman placing flowers at the bus stop. She stood there wiping her eyes, so I gently asked if everything was okay. She said my dad used to wait here for my mom. Every day. Even after she passed. My stomach dropped. She continued. He passed away last week. He wanted his ashes scattered at the park nearby because, well, that's where they used to walk after meeting here. I told her I'd spoken to him. Just once. She smiled through tears and said, "He would have loved that. He always said strangers are just friends who don't know the stories yet." When she left, I stayed there for a moment, staring down the same road he used to watch so faithfully. And for the first time, I realized how much meaning a simple bus stop could hold. How many memories could be tied to one small, ordinary place, a bench, a routine, a moment that repeats until it becomes part of someone's heartbeat. Now every time I pass that stop at 5:15, I find myself looking down the road too. Not because I expect anyone to appear, but because I understand why he kept waiting. Some love stays in the places we return to. Some grief waits quietly beside us, and some strangers leave a mark so gentle you don't feel it until they're gone. There's a small flower shop a few blocks from my apartment. It's nothing fancy, just a narrow storefront with a faded sign and a bell that jingles every time you open the door. I walk by it almost every day on my way to work, and for months I'd see the same elderly woman standing outside, arranging buckets of flowers. She had this gentle way of touching everything like the petals were made of glass. Sometimes she hummed songs I didn't recognize. Sometimes she talked to the flowers as if they talked back. One morning I finally stopped and went inside. I don't even know why. Maybe I just needed a reason to pause life for a minute. She greeted me with the warmest good morning I'd heard in a long time. I told her I wasn't looking for anything specific. She smiled and said, "People rarely come in because they're looking for flowers. They come in because they're looking for something to feel." It caught me off guard how true that felt. As she wrapped a small bouquet for me, something simple, "Just white daisies," she said. "My husband used to bring me these every Friday, even when we fought. Especially when we fought." I asked if he still did. She looked down at her hands for a moment. He passed away 8 years ago. Heart attack. Quick, but cruel. She said she kept the shop open because it was their dream together. He had planted the garden behind the store. He built the wooden counters inside. He painted the little murals on the walls. Everything here has his fingerprints, she said. Closing it would feel like erasing him. She paused, then added, "People think grief is heavy, but really, it's the emptiness that weighs the most." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just listened. Over the next few weeks, I started stopping by more often. Not always to buy something, sometimes just to say hello. She'd tell me little stories about the customers who came in, or which flowers were in season, or how her husband used to mislabel plants and insist they were creative variations. One rainy afternoon, I noticed she only had one bouquet left on the counter, a single white lily. She said, "Oh, that one's not for sale. It's for him." She nodded toward the small garden behind the shop. Lily was his favorite. I always leave one for him on rainy days. He hated the rain, but loved watching me run outside. Anyway, there was something incredibly tender about that, a ritual that existed long after the person didn't. Then one day I walked by and the shop was closed. A handwritten sign read, "Back soon," but soon stretched into days. Then a full week. I started to worry. Finally, the door opened again. But it wasn't the elderly woman standing there. It was a younger woman, maybe in her 40s, sorting through papers behind the counter. I asked if the owner was all right. She gave me a small, sad smile and said, "She passed away last month, peacefully, in her sleep." I felt something sink in my chest. The younger woman told me she was the shop owner's daughter. The flower shop had been left to her, and she planned to keep it running. Mom said this place was where she still felt closest to Dad, she said. I think she wanted to make sure he wasn't lonely. Before I left, the daughter handed me a small envelope. There was no name on it, just a daisy drawn in pencil. Inside was a note. "Thank you for visiting. Kindness is a flower too. It grows where people care. I hope you keep stopping by." I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Now, whenever I pass the flower shop, I stop for a moment. Sometimes I buy a bouquet. Sometimes I just look at the garden out back where the lilies grow. And every time I think about her words, how people don't come to buy flowers, they come to feel something. She was right. Some places bloom because of the love people leave behind. And some people keep living in the routines, the petals, the notes, and the strangers who pause long enough to listen. If this story stayed with you even just a little, you're not alone. Sometimes the gentlest moments echo the loudest. Thank you for listening and for being here. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to stay close. New voices, new memories, and new echoes come every day. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of the small moments. They're often the ones that matter most.